The stonemason's hammer struck the granite with a rhythm that had once steadied his heart. But now it only counted the hours until he would face another sleepless night with two children who cried themselves raw. Kieran Prescott wiped the dust from his brow and set down his tools as the sun dipped toward the western hills. His hands were steady, calloused from years of shaping stone for the village cottages and boundary walls that marked the frontier settlements. Those same hands had buried his wife 6 months ago. Those same hands could build anything except the peace his children needed. He walked the dirt lane toward his cottage, nodding to neighbors who had stopped offering words of comfort. The lane was a row of modest homes on the edge of Thornwick, a border village where farmers and craftsmen made their living from the wild lands. Apple trees lined the road. In summer, they had been his wife's pride. The cottage door opened before he reached it. His daughter Brenna stood in the doorway, 7 years old and solemn as a magistrate. Her brown hair hung in tangles. "Mama's not coming back, is she?" she asked for the 100th time. Kieran knelt and pulled her close. "No, little stone, she is not." "Then why does Micah keep calling for her?" From inside came the wail of his son, 4 years old and inconsolable. Kieran entered to find the boy curled on the floor near the cold hearth, tears streaming down his round cheeks. "Mama," Micah sobbed. "Want Mama." Kieran lifted the boy and held him, but the crying continued. It always continued. Every night since the fever had taken his wife, the children wept until exhaustion claimed them near dawn. Kieran had tried everything he knew. He sang the songs his own mother had taught him, but his voice was rough and broken. He told stories, but they reminded the children of the ones their mother had told better. He held them and rocked them and spoke every gentle word he possessed, and still they cried. The village healer said time would mend them. The priest said prayer would soothe them. Kieran's own father said children were resilient and would forget. But Kieran saw the shadows deepening under Brenna's eyes. He saw Micah growing thin because he barely ate. Time was not mending them. They were breaking, and he did not know how to stop it. He carried Micah to the table and tried to coax him to eat bread and cheese. Brenna picked at her portion. The evening stretched long and terrible. When darkness fell, he brought them both to the bedroom they shared and lay between them on the narrow bed. Brenna curled against his left side. Micah pressed his face into Kieran's shirt and wept. "Hush now," Kieran murmured, the words hollow. "You are safe, I am here." "Do not want you," Micah said, and the words were a knife. "Want Mama." Kieran closed his eyes and said nothing. What could he say? The boy was 4 and his world had ended. Kieran's had ended too. The crying went on. Kieran stroked Micah's hair and held Brenna's hand and waited for the hours to pass. Through the open window came a sound. At first Kieran thought it was wind moving through the apple trees. Then he realized it was a voice. Someone was singing. The melody was unlike anything he had heard before. It was low and rhythmic, with syllables that rolled and growled in a language he did not recognize. The tune was simple but strangely soothing, like water over stone. Micah's sobbing quieted. He lifted his head, listening. Brenna sat up. "What is that?" Kieran rose and went to the window. The voice came from the cottage 2 doors down, the one that had stood empty for years until last week. He had seen the new tenant moving in but had not paid much attention. His own grief left little room for curiosity about neighbors. Now he leaned out the window and heard the song more clearly. The voice was rich and warm, feminine but deeper than most human women's voices. The melody rose and fell in a pattern that felt ancient. "It is pretty," Brenna whispered. She had come to stand beside him. Micah climbed onto a stool to see out. His face was still wet with tears, but he had stopped crying. The song continued for several minutes, then faded into silence. "Sing more," Micah said to the night, but the voice did not return. For the first time in months, Kieran's children fell asleep without weeping themselves to exhaustion. They climbed into their bed and closed their eyes, and within minutes their breathing had deepened into slumber. Kieran stood in the doorway and stared at them. His chest felt tight. He needed to know who had sung that song. The next morning, Kieran walked to the cottage 2 doors down. It was smaller than his, with a thatched roof that needed repair and a garden plot that had gone to weeds. Smoke rose from the chimney. He knocked. The door opened, and Kieran found himself looking at an orc woman. She was perhaps an inch shorter than him, which made her tall for a woman but not unusually so. Her skin was green as spring leaves, and small tusks curved from her lower jaw. Her hair was black and braided in a crown around her head. She wore a simple homespun dress and an apron dusted with flour. Her eyes were dark amber and cautious. "Yes," she said. Kieran realized he was staring. In Thornwick, orcs were rare. Most humans saw them as dangerous, as remnants of the old wars. Kieran had built walls for farmers who wanted to keep orcs out of their fields. He had heard the stories of raids and violence. But this woman had flour on her hands and wariness in her eyes, and her voice was the one that had calmed his children. "I am Kieran Prescott," he said. "I live 2 cottages down. I wanted to thank you for the song you sang last night." Her expression shifted to surprise. "You heard that?" "My children heard it. They have not slept well since their mother died. Last night they fell asleep listening to you." The orc woman's face softened. "I am sorry for your loss. What is your name?" "Orla Dane." "The song you sang," Kieran said. "What was it?" "A lullaby in Orcish." "My mother sang it to me when I was small." Kieran nodded slowly. "Would you teach it to me?" Orla blinked. "Teach it to you. My children need to sleep. If that song helps them, I want to learn it. I will pay you for your time." "I do not want payment," Orla said quietly. She studied him for a long moment. "You are serious?" "Yes." She glanced past him down the lane, then back. "Come inside." Kieran followed her into the cottage. It was sparsely furnished but clean. A kettle hung over the fire. The smell of baking bread filled the room. Orla gestured to a chair at the small table. Kieran sat. She poured water into 2 cups and set one before him. "I have children also," she said. "A daughter. She is 8. Her name is Dara." "Where is she now?" "Visiting my sister in the next village. She will return tomorrow." Orla sat across from him. "I lost my husband 2 years ago. I know what it is to see your child grieve." Kieran wrapped his hands around the cup. "Then you understand." "I do." "Will you teach me the song?" Orla nodded. "But it is not a human song. The words are Orcish. You may find them difficult to pronounce." "I will try." She rose and fetched a pot from the fire, ladling stew into 2 bowls. She set one before Kieran. "Eat first, then I will teach you." Kieran had not expected hospitality. He ate the stew, which was rich with vegetables and herbs. Orla ate in silence across from him. When they finished, she cleared the bowls and sat again. "The lullaby is called Ulshar na Kor," she said. "It means stars over stone. It is what mothers sing to help children feel safe." She began to sing slowly, pronouncing each word clearly. Kieran listened, then tried to repeat the first line. His tongue stumbled over the unfamiliar syllables. Orla corrected him gently, shaping the sounds with her hands as if molding clay. They worked for an hour. Kieran's voice was rough and he could not carry a tune the way his wife had, but Orla did not criticize. She simply repeated each phrase until he could echo it back. "You are doing well," she said finally. "Practice tonight. Sing it to your children." "Will you sing again tonight?" Kieran asked. "Through your window, it helped them." Orla hesitated. "If it helps, I will." Kieran stood. "Thank you." As he turned to leave, Orla spoke again. "Your wife, did she sing to them?" "Every night," Kieran said. "She had a beautiful voice. I do not." It is not about beauty, Orla said. It is about presence. Your children need to know you are there. Kieran nodded and left. That night, after a supper his children barely touched, Kieran brought Brenna and Micah to their room. He sat on the edge of the bed and began to sing the Orcish lullaby. His pronunciation was clumsy. He forgot half the words, but he sang what he remembered, and Brenna sat up straighter, listening. "That is the song from last night," she said. "Yes." "Where did you learn it?" "The woman who lives down the lane taught me." Micah crawled into Kieran's lap. "Sing more." Kieran sang it again. This time he remembered more of the words. Then, through the open window, came Orla's voice. She was singing the same lullaby, her voice blending with his. Kieran stopped, startled, but Brenna tugged his sleeve. "Keep singing, Papa," she said. So Kieran sang, his rough voice twining with Orla's richer one. The melody filled the room. Micah rested his head against Kieran's chest. Brenna lay down on her pillow. When the song ended, both children were drowsy. Kieran tucked them in and kissed their foreheads. They fell asleep within minutes. Kieran stood at the window and looked toward Orla's cottage. He could see the warm glow of her lamp through her window, 2 doors down. He did not know why she had joined her voice to his, but he was grateful. The next evening, Kieran knocked on Orla's door again. She opened it with a small smile. "Did the song help?" "Yes." "They slept. Will you teach me another?" Orla stepped aside to let him enter. A young orc girl sat at the table, drawing with charcoal on a scrap of parchment. She had the same green skin and dark amber eyes as her mother. Her tusks were barely visible, just small points at the corners of her mouth. "This is my daughter, Dara," Orla said. The girl looked up at Kieran with curiosity but no fear. "Hello." "Hello," Kieran said. "I am Kieran. Mama said you have children." "I do. A daughter named Brenna and a son named Micah." "Are they nice?" "Very nice, though they are sad right now." Dara nodded solemnly as if she understood sadness well. Orla set bread and cheese on the table. "Sit. We will eat, and then I will teach you another lullaby." This became their pattern. Each evening after his work was done, Kieran would come to Orla's cottage. They would eat together, and she would teach him a new Orcish lullaby or help him refine the ones he had already learned. Dara would sit and draw or play quietly, occasionally humming along. Then Kieran would return home and sing to his children. And through the window, Orla's voice would join his. Within a week, neighbors began to notice. Kieran's closest neighbor, an elderly farmer named Gareth, stopped him on the lane one morning. "I have been hearing music at night," Gareth said. "Beautiful music. Is that you singing with the orc woman?" Kieran felt his shoulders tense. "It is. She is teaching me lullabies for my children." Gareth smiled, which surprised him. "It is lovely. My wife and I open our window to listen. Reminds me of when our children were small." That evening, when Kieran and Orla sang their duet through the open windows, Kieran noticed Gareth and his wife sitting on their doorstep, listening. The next night, another neighbor joined them. By the end of the second week, half the lane had begun gathering in the street at dusk to listen to the lullabies. Kieran found it strange at first. He had never wanted an audience, but Orla seemed unbothered. When he mentioned it to her, she shrugged. "Music is meant to be shared," she said. "If it brings them comfort, why should we stop?" "It feels private," Kieran said. "These songs are for my children, and they hear them. The others are simply listening." Orla looked at him steadily. "Does it bother you that they know an orc woman is singing?" Kieran hesitated. "No. It bothers me that I am not used to so many people paying attention." Orla's mouth quirked in a smile. "You are a stonemason. You build things meant to last and be noticed. Walls are not the same as songs. Both can shelter people." Kieran had no answer to that. His children were changing. Brenna smiled more often. Micah's appetite returned. They still missed their mother and sometimes they still cried, but the all-consuming grief had loosened its grip. Kieran felt it loosening in himself as well, though he did not want to admit it. Singing was something his wife had done. She had sung while baking bread, while mending clothes, while tending the garden. Her voice had been the heartbeat of their home. Kieran's voice was not beautiful. It was rough and unsteady. But when he sang with Orla, he felt something shift inside him. The tightness in his chest eased. The weight on his shoulders lightened. He told himself it was because his children were healing. That was all. But he knew he was lying. One evening, after the children had fallen asleep and the neighbors had drifted back to their homes, Kieran remained at the window. Orla's lamp was still burning in her cottage. On impulse, he walked down the lane and knocked softly on her door. She opened it, surprise flickering across her face. "Is something wrong?" "No, I wanted to ask you something." Orla stepped back to let him in. Dara was already asleep in the small bedroom. Orla gestured for Kieran to sit at the table. "What is it?" she asked. Kieran struggled to find the words. "Why are you doing this? Teaching me these songs, singing with me every night? You owe me nothing." Orla sat across from him. Her hands folded on the table. "When my husband died, I thought I would never feel whole again. I moved here to start over, to give Dara a place where she might be accepted." She paused. "Then I heard your son crying night after night, and I remembered how Dara cried. I thought if I sang, it might help. I did not expect you to come to my door. I am glad I did. So am I." Orla's voice was soft. "You asked why I do this. It is because singing these songs again makes me remember the good things. My husband used to sing with me. We would sing Dara to sleep together. I had not sung them since he died." Kieran's throat tightened. "I did not know." "How could you?" Orla smiled faintly. "We are both trying to find our way through grief. Perhaps we are helping each other." Kieran met her eyes. They were warm and steady, and something in his chest ached. "Perhaps we are," he said quietly. A month passed. The nightly duets became a cherished ritual not just for Kieran and Orla, but for the entire lane. People brought blankets and sat in the street, listening. Children played quietly while their parents hummed along. It became a gathering, a shared moment of peace at the end of each day. Brenna and Micah began to join Kieran at the window, adding their small voices to the songs. Dara did the same in Orla's cottage. The four voices blended together, and Kieran felt something he had not expected. He felt joy. It was fragile and new, but it was real. One afternoon, Kieran was shaping a lintel stone for a new barn when a stranger approached. The man was well dressed, with fine boots and a thick cloak. His face was pinched and sour. "Are you Kieran Prescott?" the man asked. I am Aldrich Moss. I am the new landlord for the cottages on this lane. I own the property where the orc woman lives." Kieran set down his chisel. "Orla Dane." "Yes." "I have come to inform you that I will be evicting her." Kieran's hands clenched. "On what grounds?" "She is causing a disturbance. Every night there are crowds in the street. It is a nuisance." "Those crowds are neighbors listening to music. There is no disturbance." Aldrich's lip curled. "She is an orc. Her presence lowers the value of my properties. I want her gone." Rage flared in Kieran's chest, hot and fierce. "You cannot evict her for being an orc. I can evict her for any reason I choose. I own the property." Aldrich adjusted his cloak. "She has until the end of the month to leave. She has done nothing wrong." "That is not your concern." Aldrich turned to leave, then paused. "If you and the others would stop encouraging this spectacle, perhaps I would reconsider. But as long as people gather, she goes." He walked away before Kieran could respond. Kieran stood in the road, fury and helplessness warring inside him. He wanted to chase Aldrich down, to argue, to fight. But he knew it would accomplish nothing. That evening he went to Orla's cottage. She opened the door and saw his face. "What happened?" she asked. Kieran told her. As he spoke, he saw the resignation settle over her like a cloak. "I see," she said quietly. "We can fight this," Kieran said. "The neighbors will support you. Everyone on this lane values what you have brought." "Kieran," Orla said gently. "He owns the property. If he wants me gone, I will have to go." "That is not right." "No, but it is reality." She turned away, her shoulders tight. "I have lived with this reality my whole life. Humans decide where orcs can live, where we can work, whether we are welcome. I should not have expected this place to be different." "It is different," Kieran said fiercely. "The people here care about you. Do they care enough to stand against a landlord who can raise their rents or evict them too?" Orla shook her head. "I will not ask them to risk that. I will find another place." "Where?" "I do not know yet." Kieran wanted to argue, but the defeat in her voice stopped him. He reached out and took her hand. She looked up, startled. "I will not let him do this," Kieran said. "You cannot stop him." "I can try." That night Kieran did not sing. Neither did Orla. The lane was silent, and the neighbors whispered among themselves, confused. Brenna tugged on Kieran's sleeve. "Why are we not singing, Papa?" "Something happened," Kieran said. "I need to fix it." The next day Kieran gathered the neighbors who regularly came to listen. There were 12 households in total. He told them about Aldrich's threat. Gareth, the old farmer, scowled. "That man is a vulture. He bought up half the properties on this lane last month and has been looking for ways to squeeze more money out of us. If we all refuse to cooperate, he cannot evict Orla," Kieran said. "He can make our lives difficult," another neighbor said nervously. "Raise rents, refuse repairs." "Then we stand together," Kieran said. "All of us. He cannot evict everyone." A woman named Marta, who lived next door to Orla, spoke up. "I agree with Kieran. Orla has done nothing but bring beauty to this lane. If we let Aldrich bully her, he will bully all of us." Slowly, the others nodded. Gareth grinned. "We should make it clear to Aldrich that this lane stands together." "How?" Kieran asked. "We sing," Gareth said. "Every night, louder than before. We make it clear that the gatherings are not just Orla's doing, they are ours." The idea spread quickly. That night when Kieran and Orla sang their duet, the neighbors did not just listen. They joined in, humming the melodies, adding their voices. The sound swelled until it filled the lane, echoing off the cottages. Aldrich arrived the next day, his face red with anger. "This is exactly what I am talking about," he shouted at Kieran. "This is a disturbance." "This is a community," Kieran said calmly. "If you evict Orla, you will have to evict all of us, because we will keep singing whether she is here or not." Aldrich sputtered. "You cannot force me to let her stay." "No, but you cannot evict an entire lane. And if you try, we will make sure everyone in Thornwick knows that you drove out a woman who did nothing but sing lullabies to grieving children." Kieran stepped closer. "How do you think that will reflect on you?" Aldrich's jaw worked. He glared at the neighbors standing behind Kieran, all of them silent and resolute. "Fine," he snapped. "She can stay. But if there are any real disturbances, she is gone." He stormed off. The neighbors cheered. Kieran turned to see Orla standing in her doorway, tears streaming down her green cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered. Kieran crossed the distance between them. "You do not have to thank me. This is your home." Orla smiled, tremulous and bright. "It is because of you." That night the singing was jubilant. The whole lane gathered, and the lullabies transformed into songs of celebration. Children danced in the street. Adults clapped and laughed. Kieran stood beside Orla, and for the first time since his wife's death, he felt light. After the crowd dispersed, Kieran walked Orla back to her door. Dara had fallen asleep on a blanket in the grass, and Kieran carried her inside, laying her gently on her bed. When he returned to the main room, Orla was standing by the fire. "Kieran," she said, I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "I am falling in love with you." The words struck him like a hammer. He stared at her, unable to speak. Orla's hands twisted together. "I know it is too soon. I know you are still grieving your wife, but I cannot keep pretending that these evenings are only about the children. When I sing with you, I feel alive again. I feel seen." Her voice broke. "If you do not feel the same, I understand. I will not speak of it again." Kieran crossed the room in 3 strides and took her hands in his. "I feel the same," he said hoarsely. "I have been trying not to. I have been telling myself it is too soon, that I am betraying her memory. But I cannot stop thinking about you. I cannot stop wanting to hear your voice. I cannot stop," he broke off, his throat closing. Orla reached up and cupped his face. "You are not betraying her. She would want you to be happy. I do not know if I deserve to be happy." "You do," Orla said fiercely. "You are a good man, a good father. You deserve love." Kieran leaned his forehead against hers. "So do you." They stood like that, breathing together, until Kieran pulled back. "I need time," he said. "Not because I doubt what I feel, but because I need to make peace with it." Orla nodded. "I will wait." Kieran kissed her forehead and left. The days that followed were both torturous and tender. Kieran continued to visit Orla each evening. They sang together. They talked, but the air between them thrummed with unspoken longing. Kieran's children noticed. "Do you like Miss Orla?" Brenna asked one morning. Kieran paused in the middle of kneading dough. "Yes, I do." "Mama would like her too," Brenna said matter-of-factly. Kieran looked at his daughter. She was braiding Micah's hair, her small fingers deft. "You think so?" he asked. "Mama always said we should be kind to people. Miss Orla is kind, and she makes you smile." "Do I not smile?" Brenna tilted her head. "Not as much as before Mama died, but you smile when Miss Orla sings." Micah nodded. "I like her voice." Kieran knelt beside his children. "If I were to care for Miss Orla, would that be all right with you?" Brenna considered this seriously. "Would she come live with us?" "I do not know. Maybe. And Dara too?" "Yes." "Then it is all right," Brenna said. "Dara is nice." Micah climbed into Kieran's lap. "Will you still sing to us?" "Always," Kieran said. That evening, Kieran went to his wife's grave. It was a simple marker in the churchyard, shaded by an oak tree. He sat on the ground and spoke to her as he had not done since the funeral. "I do not know if you can hear me," he said, "but I need to say this. I met someone. Her name is Orla. She is kind and strong, and she has helped me more than I can say. I think I love her." He paused, his voice breaking. "I will always love you, but I need to let myself live again. I need to let myself be happy. I hope you understand." The wind rustled through the oak leaves. A bird sang somewhere nearby. Kieran stayed until the sun set, then rose and walked back to the lane. He went to Orla's cottage and knocked. She opened the door, and he did not give her time to speak. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her. Orla made a soft sound of surprise, then melted against him. Her arms came around his neck. The kiss was gentle and fierce all at once, full of everything they had been holding back. When they finally pulled apart, Orla was smiling through tears. "I take it you made peace with it," she said. "I did," Kieran said. "I love you, Orla. I love you too." From inside the cottage came a small giggle. They turned to see Dara peeking around the bedroom door, grinning. "Does this mean we are going to be a family?" she asked. Kieran looked at Orla. She looked back at him, hope shining in her amber eyes. "Yes," Kieran said. "If your mother will have us." Orla laughed. "I will." The wedding took place 2 months later in the autumn, when the apple trees on the lane bore fruit. It was a small ceremony in the village church, attended by the neighbors who had stood with them. Brenna and Dara stood as attendants, and Micah carried the rings on a velvet cushion. The priest was hesitant at first to marry a human and an orc, but Gareth, who had known the priest since boyhood, convinced him. When Kieran and Orla exchanged vows, their voices were steady and clear. They promised to love each other, to care for their children, to build a life together. Afterward, the entire lane gathered for a feast. Tables were set up in the street, laden with food each household had contributed. Lanterns hung from the apple trees, casting warm light over the celebration. As the evening deepened, someone called for a song. Kieran looked at Orla. She smiled. They stood together and began to sing one of the Orcish lullabies. Brenna, Micah, and Dara joined in, their young voices blending with their parents'. Then the neighbors added their voices until the whole lane was singing. The sound rose into the night, a tapestry of harmony and hope. Kieran thought of his first wife, and he hoped she was listening. He hoped she knew that he had found a way forward, that their children were healing, that love had found him again. When the song ended, the lane erupted in applause. Orla leaned against Kieran's side, and he wrapped his arm around her. "This is home," she said softly. "Yes," Kieran said, "this is home." The months that followed were filled with adjustment and joy. Orla and Dara moved into Kieran's cottage, and the space that had felt so empty now brimmed with life. Brenna and Dara became inseparable, whispering secrets and playing games. Micah followed Dara everywhere, adoring her like a second older sister. Kieran expanded the cottage, adding a new room so the children would have more space. Orla planted a garden, and the vegetables she grew were the envy of the lane. Every night they sang. Sometimes it was just the five of them, gathered around the hearth. Other nights, the neighbors would join, and the lane would fill with music. Kieran's work as a stonemason flourished. His skill was well known, and commissions came from villages throughout the region. But he always made time to return home before dusk, to share supper with his family, to sing with Orla. One evening, as winter settled over Thornwick, Orla told Kieran she was expecting a child. He stared at her, stunned into silence. "Are you pleased?" Orla asked, her hands resting on her still flat belly. Kieran pulled her close. "I am more than pleased. I am overjoyed." The children were ecstatic. Brenna immediately began planning what they would name the baby. Dara offered to help care for it. Micah asked if it would have tusks. "Maybe," Orla said, laughing. "We will have to wait and see." The baby was born in the spring, a healthy girl with green-tinged skin and no tusks. She had Kieran's dark hair and Orla's amber eyes. They named her Beatrice. Kieran held her in the firelight, marveling at her tiny fingers and the way she yawned. Orla sat beside him, exhausted and radiant. "She is perfect," Kieran whispered. "She is ours," Orla said. Brenna, Dara, and Micah crowded around to see their new sister. They took turns gently stroking her soft hair. That night, Kieran sang a lullaby to Beatrice, the first Orcish song Orla had taught him. His voice was still rough, still imperfect, but it was full of love. Orla joined him, and their voices wove together, filling the cottage with warmth. The years passed gently. Beatrice grew into a lively toddler, quick to laugh and stubborn as stone. The older children doted on her, teaching her songs and games. Kieran's cottage became a gathering place for the lane. On warm evenings, families would bring their suppers and eat together in the street. The children would play while the adults talked and laughed. And always, there was singing. The lullabies that had once been a lifeline for two grieving families became a gift to the entire community. Parents taught the Orcish songs to their own children. Travelers passing through Thornwick would stop to listen, drawn by the music. Kieran and Orla's duets became legendary in the village. People spoke of the stonemason and the orc woman whose voices could make even the hardest heart soften. One evening, when Beatrice was 3 and the older children were helping her learn the words to a lullaby, Kieran sat on the doorstep with Orla. The The street was alive with music. Neighbors sang together, their voices rising and falling in harmony. Lanterns glowed in the twilight. Children chased fireflies. "You ever think about how this all started?" Orla asked. Kieran nodded. "I think about it often. I was so lost. I did not know how to help my children. And then you sang. And you came to my door," Orla said. "You could have ignored it. You could have decided it was not worth the effort to learn. I could not ignore it. Your voice gave my children peace. I needed to understand why." Orla leaned her head on his shoulder. "I am glad you did. So am I." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the life they had built together unfold before them. Brenna was now 14, tall and serious, with a talent for sketching that reminded Kieran of his late wife. Dara was 15, strong and thoughtful, already talking about becoming a healer. Micah was 11, cheerful and curious, always asking questions about how things worked. And Beatrice was a spark of wild joy, singing at the top of her lungs and dragging her older siblings into dances. "We have been blessed," Kieran said quietly. "We have," Orla agreed. As the stars began to appear, the families on the lane sang one final lullaby together. The melody drifted into the night, a testament to love and resilience, and the bonds that could form when people chose to see each other as human, as worthy, as beloved. Kieran's voice blended with Orla's, and he thought of the journey that had brought them here, the grief that had nearly broken him, the courage it had taken to ask for help, the grace of a woman who had shared her songs and her heart. He thought of his first wife, and he sent a silent thank you into the stars. She had taught him what love looked like. Orla had taught him that love could come again, different but no less true. When the song ended, Kieran kissed Orla's temple. "I love you," he said. "I love you too," she replied. Beatrice ran over, her small face flushed with excitement. "Papa, Mama, sing again." Kieran laughed and scooped her up. "One more little stone, then bed." Orla began the melody and Kieran joined her. Their children gathered around, adding their voices. The neighbors listened, smiling. And the lane, which had once been just a row of cottages on the edge of a frontier village, became something more. It became home. Years later, when Kieran was an old man with silver in his hair and Orla's braids were streaked with gray, they would still sing together. Their children, grown and with families of their own, would bring their own children to the lane for the nightly songs. The tradition they had begun would endure, passed down through generations, a reminder that even in the darkest times beauty could be found, that grief could be transformed into joy, that love, when nurtured, could heal even the deepest wounds. But on this evening, with the stars bright overhead and the music of their community filling the air, Kieran and Orla simply held each other and sang. And it was enough. One winter evening, when snow blanketed the lane and the apple trees stood bare, Kieran sat by the fire with Orla. The children were asleep, even Beatrice, who at 5 still resisted bedtime with all her might. "You remember the first song you taught me?" Kieran asked. "Ulshar na kor," Orla said. "Stars over stone." I could barely pronounce the words. Orla smiled. "You have come a long way since then." "We both have." Kieran reached for her hand. Her fingers were calloused from years of work, warm and strong. "I never thought I would feel whole again after she died," Kieran said quietly. "I thought that part of my life was over. And now I know that life does not end when we lose someone we love. It changes, it transforms, but it continues." He looked at her. "You helped me see that." Orla's eyes glistened. "You helped me see it too." They sat together in the firelight, the silence between them rich and full. Outside, the snow fell softly, muffling the world. In the morning, the lane would wake to a transformed landscape, white and pristine. The children would build snow fortresses and throw snowballs. The neighbors would shovel paths and share warm cider. And when evening came, they would gather again as they always did and sing. But for now, Kieran and Orla simply held each other, grateful for the journey that had brought them here, for the love that had healed them, for the family they had built together. In the bedroom, Beatrice murmured in her sleep, and Kieran heard Brenna's soft voice singing a lullaby. A moment later, Dara joined in, and then Micah. The three older children sang together, soothing their little sister back into dreams. Kieran's throat tightened with emotion. "They learned well," Orla whispered. "They had a good teacher," Kieran said. "They had two," Orla corrected. Kieran pulled her close, and they listened to their children sing. The melody was one Orla had taught him years ago on a night when he had been desperate and lost. Now it was a gift his children gave freely, a legacy of love. When the song ended and the house fell silent again, Kieran rose and checked on the children. They were all asleep, Brenna and Dara in one bed, Micah in his own, and Beatrice curled in her little cot. He stood in the doorway and watched them, his heart full. This was what he had fought for. This was what Orla had fought for. Not just their own happiness, but the chance to give their children a life filled with love and music and belonging. He returned to the main room where Orla waited. "Come to bed," she said softly. Kieran banked the fire and followed her. They lay together in the darkness, her head on his chest, his arm around her shoulders. "Kieran," Orla said. "Yes." "You think we will ever stop singing?" He smiled. "Not as long as we have breath." "Good," she said. "Because I am not finished yet." Neither was he. The next evening, as the sun set and the neighbors began to gather, Kieran and Orla stood at their window. The children were already outside, playing in the snow with the other lane children. Kieran began the first lullaby, his voice steady and strong. Orla joined him, her voice weaving through his. The neighbors picked up the melody, and soon the entire lane was singing. The sound rose into the cold winter air, a defiant declaration of warmth and community. It echoed off the snow-covered rooftops and carried into the forest beyond. Travelers on the road heard it and paused, drawn by the beauty. They would later speak of the village where humans and an orc family sang together, where music bridged the divide between species, where love conquered prejudice. But for those who lived on the lane, the singing was simply part of life. It was the rhythm of their days, the heartbeat of their community. And for Kieran and Orla, it was the proof that they had found their way through the darkness, together. As the song ended and the children laughed and played, Kieran looked at Orla. She looked back at him, her amber eyes bright with love. No words were needed. They had said everything that mattered in the songs they shared. Kieran took her hand, and they stepped outside to join their children in the snow. The lane was alive with light and laughter. Lanterns glowed in every window. Neighbors called greetings to one another. The smell of wood smoke and baking bread filled the air. This was home. This was family. This was the life they had built, one song at a time. And as the stars began to appear overhead, Kieran knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, with love, with music. With the strength of a community bound by something deeper than blood, they would sing, and they would endure. Years turned into decades. The children grew and married and brought their own children to the lane. The cottages were repaired and expanded. New families moved in, drawn by the stories of the singing lane, and through it all, Kieran and Orla continued their duets. Even when their voices grew thin with age, even when their hands trembled and their steps slowed, they sang. The neighbors, now old friends, sang with them. The children, now grandparents themselves, taught the lullabies to the youngest generation. The tradition endured, a living testament to the power of love and music. One spring evening, when the apple trees were in bloom and the air was sweet with their fragrance, Kieran and Orla sat on their doorstep. They were very old now, their bodies worn but their spirits bright. The lane was as lively as ever. Children played in the street. Families gathered to share the evening meal. And when the sun began to set, the singing began. Kieran and Orla added their voices, thin and wavering but still in harmony. Around them, their children and grandchildren sang. The neighbors joined in, as they had for decades. The melody rose into the twilight, carrying with it all the love and hope and resilience of a community that had learned to see beyond difference, to embrace the strange and the unfamiliar, to find beauty in unexpected places. When the song ended, Kieran turned to Orla. "We did well," he said. "We did," she agreed. They sat together, hand in hand, as the stars appeared one by one overhead. And in that moment, surrounded by the family and community they had built, Kieran felt a peace so profound it brought tears to his eyes. This was the legacy they would leave. Not stone walls or buildings, though Kieran had built many. Not songs written down or recorded, though the lullabies would be remembered for generations. The legacy was this: a lane full of people who knew how to love across boundaries, who valued kindness over fear, who understood that home was not a place, but the people you chose to sing with. Orla leaned her head on Kieran's shoulder and he kissed her hair. "I love you," he said. "I love you too," she replied. And as the night deepened and the music faded into comfortable silence, they sat together, two souls who had found each other in the midst of grief and built something beautiful. The lane, their home, their family. It was everything they had ever needed, and it was more than enough.